Hi everyone, it's Lisa. In today's video, I'm going to be making 25 cards with Doodlebug's Made with Love collection. And before I get started with this card tutorial, please click that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications if you want to see more card making videos from me. So in this video, I am using the 6x6 paper pad from Doodlebug Designs, and you can see all of the beautiful patterns in here. Again, this is the Made with Love collection, which is a brand new collection from Doodlebug, and it's all about baking. So there's so many cute papers. You can see the cookies and the forks and knives, and there's some rolling pins and different baking goodies on there. Some of the designs on the paper pad are cupcakes. There's one that have the little Hershey Kisses. There's some cookies. There are these cut aparts in the paper pad, which I don't end up using. I just end up using all of the designs. I also bring in the chit chat pieces and the odds and ends, and in a previous haul video that I did, I laid them all out on the table, so if you're interested in seeing that, I will link that haul video down below. And I also am bringing in the 12 by 12 matching solids paper pack, as well as these shaped sprinkles. These are the Bake Me Happy, Sprinkling of Love, and With All My Heart sprinkles. So for card 1, I have this cupcake paper that I cut down to 5 1/8 by 3 7/8, and I'm layering that onto a piece of green cardstock from my stash, and that measures 5 1/4 by 4. I picked up this green cardstock from my stash because there were no greens this color in the solids kit, so I wanted to use that green because I thought that it matched that word hello really well. And those two pieces were layered onto a piece of pink cardstock from the 12 by 12 solids, and that was cut to 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and they were all layered on an A2 size card base. An A2 size card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I will be using the A2 size card bases in this video. I will also be doing several slimline cards in this video. So I decide here to take those sprinkles and add them to the actual sprinkles on those cupcakes from the odds and ends pack, and just try to put them so that they're covered up to just add some dimension to these cupcakes. You can see one of the cupcakes I did put some foam just so that it stands up, and then the Hello Cupcake words, those were from the Chit Chat collection. And then I'm taking some of the Nuvo glitter drops in the Sherbet Shimmer color and using those for the dots. Now you could have used the dots in the shaped sprinkles pack, but I chose just to go with the Nuvo glitter drops. Now that Chit Chat collection of ephemera pieces, those are all sentiments that are related to the ephemera pieces that are in the odds and ends collection. So those are the difference between those packs. The Chit Chat are the sentiments and the odds and ends are the ephemera. So for the next two cards, I am going with the same design because I had some ephemera pieces in different colors that I wanted to go ahead and use the same design because they were identical. So I'm just going to show you the process for the one. So I have that pattern paper, which is cut to 4 and 5 1/4, and that has mixers on it. And then I have the yellow polka dot paper, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which I put down there for the strip. I do have a circle that I cut out of mint cardstock. It's actually a stitch circle, and that mint cardstock is from the 12 by 12 solids pack. That is a 3 1/4 stitched circle. And the For You was a tag from the Chit Chat collection, and I just trimmed off the edges just to make it look like a straight sentiment rather than a tag. And here I'm just layering on these ephemera pieces. I love how adorable these ephemera pieces are in this collection. So here I'm going to layer that entire layer onto a piece of mint cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and that will be layered onto a piece of the yellow cardstock, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That yellow cardstock is also from the 12 by 12 solids pack, and then that entire piece will be layered onto an A2 size card base. I do take some twine in my stash and tie it in a bow, and I add a glue dot to the back of that just to keep that down on the card. And then I decide to just add some of the sprinkles to the circle on the front of this card just to add some more fun to it. Now, by the way, I will have all of these card measurements listed in my blog, so if you want to recreate any of these cards, you can go over to my blog and find all of the supplies that I've used. If there's any additional supplies, they will also be there, and all of the measurements will be there as well, and that link will be below. So this is a Spectrum Sparkle pen in clear that I just added an overlay to add some shimmer to the frosting. And here is the exact duplicate of that card, just in the different colors, so you can see the red and the green. And by the way, this is the only card in this video that has a duplicate. All of the other 24 cards that I created have a different design. So moving on to card 4, I am creating a slimline card, and I am using the scalloped slimline card die set from the Stamps of Life, which includes these 3 pieces that you see with the cutouts. So it has this scalloped layering piece, which I die cut out of the yellow cardstock, and I layered that onto a scalloped piece that I cut out with the same die set, so you can see the red showing through those scallops. And I also cut out the card base, and it's in a white card base that has scallops, so that's all part of the scallop slimline die set from the Stamps of Life. So the sentiment that I wanted to use, it says the world with love. So it was missing the word you. So you previously saw me stamp out the word you from a stamp set that I had in my collection, stamped it on to some red cardstock, and then I'm adding the word you there on the card. So it says you sprinkle the world with love, and I'm adding the shakers there and adding some sprinkles to the front of this card. So I did get the 6x6 paper pad, and part of me wished, because I love making slimline cards so much, part of me wished I would have got the 12x12 just so that I can add those beautiful designs on the slimline. But here's a way that you can use just your solids and decorate the front of a slimline just with the stuff you have in your stash, and just use your solid cardstock to make a really beautiful slimline card, and I really love the way that this turned out. So here I'm just adding glue to the back of this layer and adding it to the slimline card base. Again, that card base was from the scalloped slimline card die set from the Stamps of Life. So my next card will also be a slimline card, but I just want to show you how to create the base from scratch. So here I took an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. I cut it down to 8.5 by 7 and then scored it at 3.5 inches, and took my bone folder and just press down over that score just to smooth that down, and there's your card base. So here's a creative way to use pattern paper on your slimline card when you're only using it from a 6x6 paper pad. So the plaid paper I cut to 3.25 by 3.125, and the yellow polka dot paper is 5 inches wide by 3.125 high. And then I am using a strip. You saw that pattern from the paper, it's the mixing bowls. I just cut that strip to 3.125 high, and I'm going to just use that to separate the break in that paper. So you can see how I'm layering this on. I have a teal piece of cardstock that I'm layering it on, and that measures 8.25 by 3.25, and I'm just going to be putting that strip, that border strip there in the middle to just kind of cover up that line where those two papers connect. I am taking this sentiment, you bake me happy, and I just cut out the word bake, and I'm not going to use that because I wanted to use the large word bake that's included in the Chit Chat collection. So you can see how I'm positioning some of the ephemera down. I am using the heart border, but I do cut off part of the hearts because I don't need the whole thing. And I'm gonna do the you bake me happy there, and I'm also going to add that cute little timer there to the corner. I thought that was so cute. I thought it matched perfectly, and it does go with that oven. That oven is so cute, and you can see it's gonna fill the left side of that card. Now I'm just layering all these pieces onto this particular layer. Now there is another pink layer that I'm going to layer all of these on, and the pink layer I cut to 8 3/8 by 3 3/8. You can see I am putting some foam there on the timer just to make that stand up just a little bit. So here's where I'm adding it to the pink layer. And then that entire layer is going to end up going on the slimline card base that I created. And I just love how cute this card turned out. I think it's so stinking cute. So I do decide to go back in and add some of these little cookies to the oven. Just thought that would be really cute, like they're baking in the oven. So that completes this card. So for card 6, I am using this fork and spoon pattern paper, and that measures 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. I'm layering that onto that piece of green cardstock from my stash, which measures 4 by 5 1/4, and then that was layered onto the red from the 12 by 12 solids, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then that will be layered onto a white A2 size card base. So that 12 by 12 solids pad, as I mentioned briefly earlier, it didn't have any of the greens that matched this particular green in that pad. The greens in that pad were mainly teal colors, and this was more of a lime green, so that's why I brought in that green from my stash. So here I added the apron. You can see I added that heart just for dimension to that apron, and added the spoons and the sentiment, "You're flippin' awesome." For my next card, I am bringing in the milk and cookies, and I have this strip of plaid paper. It's 4 by 2 1/4. I add that to the center of the chocolate chip paper, which is 4 by 5 1/4. I am using a pink doily from my stash, and I'm adding some glue to the back, and I'm going to add that to the center of that card layer. And that's where the milk and cookies is going to sit, right on top of that doily. I am bringing in the sentiment, "I love you a chocolate." And here I'm going to be just positioning those cookies where I want them. I decided that I'm going to put some foam adhesive on the back of the milk just so that it's raised slightly above those cookies. And there's the sentiment, which I'm also, sorry that's cut off the screen by the way, but I'm also going to add some double-sided adhesive foam to the back of that so that stands up just a little bit. And then I'm going to add that entire card layer onto a piece of the teal cardstock from the 12 by 12 solid pack. That teal measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and that will be layered onto a piece of brown cardstock, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I do bring in these heart-shaped sprinkles and add them to the front of this card, and then that entire layer will be put on a white A2 size card base. And that completes this card. For my next card, I am using this border strips, and I'm just cutting this pink border because I want to use that one on my card. I also have this scrap piece of plaid from the pattern paper, which I have cut down to 5 1/4 by 7/8 inch tall. So I'm adding that to the bottom of this cupcake layer, and then adding that stripe that I cut from the border sheet. And that cupcake paper is 5 1/4 by 4, and then that entire layer will be layered onto a piece of brown cardstock that measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. I am going to be bringing in some of these elements from the odds and ends pack. So I have the mixing bowl, the spatula, some eggs, mixing spoon, butter, some brown sugar, and the sentiment, "Life is sweet." So I wanted to make sure that those elements had a border down there at the bottom so that they look grounded and they're not just floating there on the card. So here I'm just going to go ahead and add all of these elements. Some of them will be tucked behind others, but I think all of these elements are so super cute just to create this little fun baking scene on the front of this card. So all of those elements are adhered flat to the card, and then I decide to add some double-sided adhesive foam to the back of the sentiment just so that one is raised slightly above the other elements on there. And then that entire layer will be added to an A2 size white card base. Now all of these card bases here that I've been using that are A2 in size, I picked up off Amazon, and they're pre-cut card bases, and I will also have that link below so you can see that as well in case you're interested. So this card is going to be another slimline card. So I have my card base. It's cut out of this poppy cardstock from the Stamps of Life. Again, a slimline card base. It's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper cut down to 8.5 by 7 and scored at 3.5. That yellow layer is 3 1/4 by 8 1/4, and then I'm just going to layer that onto the card base and then put all these really beautiful ephemera pieces on the front of this card. I love making slimline cards, so there are quite a few in this video. If you've never made one before, I would say give it a try. You can fit so much ephemera and just so many things on the front of a slimline card, and they fit in a standard size envelope, like a number 10 envelope that you would use for business mailing, and they're just so much fun. So I'm adding the flowers, I'm adding the mason jar, the jar with the spoons, the mixing bowls, and then the sentiment that says happy birthday. I am adding the flowers flat to the card, and then all of the other 3 elements are adhered with foam. So the mason jar, the mixing bowls, and then the spoons, those have foam, as well as the sentiment happy birthday has foam on the back of that. And that completes this card. So for card 10, it is going to be another slimline card. So I have some layers cut out of teal and pink. That pink layer is 3 1/4 by 8 1/4, and the teal layer is 3 3/8 by 8 3/8. The card base will be a white slimline card base. So I'm bringing in the sugar, the flour, and the cocoa jars or the canisters, and I'm going to add those to the front. The flour, which is going to be in the middle, the yellow canister, that is going to be raised up on foam. So they're not going to be aligned straight. You can see that the other 2, the red and green one, are a little bit tucked in underneath the yellow, where the yellow one is added up on foam, so it adds a little bit of dimension there to the card. I am using 2 of the pieces from the Chit Chat words. I have the You Bake Me So and then the word happy. So I just marking off my spot where I wanted to trim. I wanted to make sure that that You Bake Me So piece, the yellow part, did not go underneath the H in the word happy. So I was just marking off where I needed to cut. I am going to add some double-sided adhesive foam to the back of the word happy just to raise that up just a little bit. And then I will add that to the front of my card layer. I also bring in some of the cookie stickers from the Bake Me Happy Sprinkles set and add some of those to the front of this card. And then I add that entire layer to my slimline card base. And that completes this card. For my next card, I am using a couple of the borders from that border page from the 6x6 pad. I have the fork and spoon border, and I'm also using a teal border, and I'm going to layer those onto the bottom of this chocolate chip piece of pattern paper. That chocolate chip paper measures 5 1/8 by 3 7/8. And then I'm going to create another cute little scene similar to the one I previously did, only this time I'm using a lot of the cocoa ingredients. So I have the cocoa, the vanilla, the baking powder, eggs, and I thought this was so cute. And all of those colors, you can see the teals in some of those, like the Hello Sugar sentiment, the teal in the vanilla, the teal in the cocoa. They all bring out that teal that's in that teal cardstock that I'm going to be attaching that layer to, as well as that teal border. So I am adding foam to the eggs just to have those stand up just a little bit, and popping those down on the front of the card. Again, I use those borders to just create a foundation for those elements to sit on, almost like they're sitting on the counter in a kitchen. And then add that to the teal cardstock, which measures 5 1/4 by 4, and then to the brown cardstock, which measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. I do add some of the chocolate chips. And then I'm going to be bringing in, there's a piece of chocolate cake that I'm going to be bringing in, but there's no room on the front. So I thought, well, we have all the ingredients on the front, so I'll go ahead and add the completed cake on the inside of the card. So you'll see that here shortly. So I'm going to add that entire layer to the front of the A2 size white card base. And then here on the inside of the card is where I'm going to put that chocolate cake. And it just says, "You're the icing on the cake," just to add something to the inside. And that completes this card. For my next card, I am bringing in a scalloped rectangle die from the Stamps of Life, which I cut this pattern paper out of. That scalloped rectangle die is about 5¼ by 4. So if you don't have a scalloped rectangle die, just cut your paper down and you can do the same scene on just a regular rectangular card. So I have a few elements here. I have the word sweet and I have the frosting bag, and I think that looks so adorable. Make it look like the frosting bag is just piping that frosting right there onto the front of that card. And I have the heart border that I'm going to add to the top. And of course I needed to add a sentiment stamp just to kind of complete this sentiment rather than it just saying sweet. So I have a stamp on my collection that says thanks for being so, and I added that in a gray ink and just added that to the front of the card so it says thanks for being so sweet. And that sentiment is actually from the Sweet Statement set from the Stamps of Life, which also includes a large die that says the word sweet on it. And it also includes several sentiments such as you are very sweet, you are so sweet, sending sweet thoughts your way, love is sweet, sweet friend. So I thought that was quite appropriate. And I'll link that below too in case you're interested. So here I'm using my Spectrum Sparkle pen in clear to add some glitter to that frosting, and that completes this card. So for my next card, I am going to be using some dotted heart dies. And these are some dies from the Stamps of Life that are some nesting dies that have several heart dies in the set. So I'm using 2 of those here. And that heart pattern paper is 4 by 5¼ and that's layered onto some red cardstock, which is 4⅛ by 5�3�8. And then one of the red hearts was cut out of a solid red cardstock, and then the layering heart there in the teal was cut out of a piece of pattern paper. I am bringing in this cute little refrigerator, adding that to the front of that card and adding the XOXO and the sentiment in the circle bubble that says love you, and adding that to an A2 size card base, and that completes that card. So for my next card, I am bringing in some dotted oval dies, very similar to the dotted heart dies from the Stamps of Life. They are a series of nesting dies. So I die cut the larger one out of a red piece of cardstock, and then the top layering one out of that fork and spoon pattern paper, and add them to another piece of that teal pattern paper, which measures 4 by 5¼ and then added that onto a piece of red cardstock that measures 4⅛ by 5�3�8. Bringing in this blender and adding the Sentiment Perfect Blend up on some foam tape, and then that will be added to an A2 size white card base. Now, when I first started going through this collection to see how I wanted to create these cards, I did just kind of separate all of those sentiments and then separate all of the chit chat pieces just to see what goes with what. So I spread them all out on my desk, and a lot of the sentiments, just like this one, they relate to some of those ephemera pieces. So I just wanted to kind of put what goes together and then be able to decide what kind of cards I want to create. So that's one way when you get this pack of over 100 pieces of ephemera, just kind of organize it with what goes with what sentiment. That way you'll have an idea of what you want to use. So I did add some twine there, and then I'm adding some of these heart-shaped sprinkles, and that completes this card. For my next card, I'm bringing in some of the smaller dotted heart dies from the Stamps of Life, and I'm adding the marshmallow and the chocolate pieces to each one of those hearts. So I cut those hearts out of pattern paper. It was just from a piece of the pattern paper scrap that I had in my stash from cutting down and doing all of these cards. And I'm bringing in the XOXO banner and then the large chocolate bar and adding those as well. That heart-shaped pattern paper is 4 by 5¼ and it's layered onto some red cardstock, which is 4⅛ by 5�3�8, and that's layered onto an A2 size card base. I add a couple of the heart-shaped sprinkles, and that completes this card. For this next card, I'm using some circle dies. I have a stitch circle, which is the teal pattern paper, which is a 2 3/4 inch stitch circle, which I layered onto a white circle, which is a 3-inch white circle. I also have this Love You hot pink strip of pattern paper, which is cut to 2 inches by 4 3/4, and I'm just making a fishtail banner at the bottom. When making a fishtail banner, I find it easy to mark the center of the where you want to do your cut, and I just marked it with a pencil and then cut straight up from the middle and then did the fishtail. And I'm layering this onto some other pattern paper. I have that polka dot paper. It's 3 5/8 by 4 7/8, which is then layered onto a piece of teal cardstock, which is 4 by 5 1/4. I am layering the milk and cookies onto the circle, and one of the cookies is going to be up on foam, and that's going to be layered there in the center. I decide that I want to use this word cookie, so I'm cutting it out of one of these little sentiment squares from the pattern paper. And I'm using the word hey, that will be there at the top, and then cookie at the bottom. I thought that was so cute, and I love this card. This card I'm actually going to be giving to my daughter because my daughter's name is Brooke, which we've been calling her Brookie Cookie since she was born, and I just thought this was so appropriate. I absolutely love this card. Add some sprinkles there to the center, and I'm going to take that entire layer and add that to an A2 card base in white. And then I'm going to take my Spectrum Sparkle clear pen and just add some sparkle to the cookies as well as to the frosting on the word hey. I just keep saying frosting because it looks like frosting to me. And that completes that card. So for my next card, I have this strip of polka dot paper. It's 4 by 2 1/8. And then that striped paper, it's 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm adding the polka dot paper to the top half of the stripe paper and bringing in this doily from my stash, adding a little bit of glue to the back and adding it there at the top portion of that card layer. And I'm bringing in this large sentiment. It says hello sugar, and I want you to notice the stripes in this sentiment that are the same stripes that are in the pattern paper. So that's why I chose that pattern paper. And I also made sure that the stripes in my pattern paper are vertical, which are the same direction as the stripes in that sentiment. I just thought it would make everything look uniform. So I'm adding a couple of hearts there at the bottom and adding that cupcake up on foam in the lower right hand corner of that card layer. And then that's going to go onto a teal card layer, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and that will be added to a white A2 size card base. And then I add some glitter there to the word sugar and to the top of the cupcake, and that completes this card. So part of the paper pack had this sheet of tags, which I wasn't really crazy about this sheet, and the back side did not have pattern paper on the back, so I couldn't even use the back side of this sheet. So I just decided I was going to use one of the tags for this card. I really didn't use many of the tags, but if you're giving treats to somebody, maybe you baked some home goods, you can use these tags on your little treat bags or gift boxes or whatever you do to package your treats. So I decided to include one of the tags here on this card. So some of the layers here, that flower layer is 4 by 3 1/4. I have the polka dot with the yellow, it's 4 by 1 7/8. I did cut a gray strip from the cardstock, large cardstock 12 by 12 pad, which measures 4 inches wide by 1/4 inch high, just to separate the gaps in that paper. And I'm going to put the tag at the bottom portion of that. So I have a little scene with the mixing bowl and the powdered sugar and all of those other elements at the top, and then I'm going to put the tag towards the bottom, and the tag is also the mixing bowl, and it says all you need is love. And I'm adding a piece of twine there to cover up the hole. I'm going to add that to an A2 size white card base, and by the way, the pink paper is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So the decorated paper was added to that pink cardstock. I do add one of these heart sprinkles with some hot glue to the top of the tag and add a few more hearts to the bottom portion, and that completes that card. For my next card, I have this polka dot paper, which is 5 1/8 by 3 7/8, and I have this piece of pattern paper that I cut down. It's the actual cookie pattern paper, and I just cut a strip of that to 5 1/8 by 3/8 inches high and added that to the bottom of that polka dot paper. I am bringing in the cookie pan as well as some of these morsels. They look like Hershey Kisses to me. They're so stinking cute. Add those morsels to the bottom of that strip or the bottom of that card layer. I am going to take some of my Ginger Snap ink, which is a light brown ink from the Stamps of Life, and I decide to add it to the sentiment, Your One Smart Cookie, and then add that ink to the edge of the entire card layer. So that entire card layer will be added to a piece of brown cardstock that's 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and then that will be added to a white A2 size card base. And that completes that card. So for my next card, I have a couple of these strips of plaid pattern paper, and I really didn't measure them, but if you wanted a measurement, you can cut them to 5 3/8 inches wide by like a 1/4 inch tall, or even an 1/8 inch would do, and just added those strips to that flower paper, which is 5 3/8 wide by 2 inches high. And I added that to a piece of red cardstock that measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. I have this teal strip which measures 5 3/8 by 3/4 inches, and I add that towards the bottom part of that cardstock. I am adding the cherry pie to the wire rack and just added those together, and then adding some glue and adding them there to the top portion of the card, bringing in the Hello Sweetie Pie sentiment and adding that towards the bottom of the card, putting some white twine around the middle, tying that there in a knot, and then tying it in a bow, and then just trimming off the ends of that twine. And that entire layer is going to be added to a white A2 size card base. I am putting one glue dot to the back of that knot in the twine just to keep it down so that bow stays, the way that I want it to stay. And then adding some of those hearts there to each side of the sentiment. And that will complete this card. For my next card, I have a piece of yellow cardstock, and it's cut down to 5 1/4 by 2 1/8, and I just trim off the excess there. And then that is layered onto the flower paper, which is 5 1/4 by 4, and then I bring in these postage stamps and add 3 of them there at the top. And I'm going to be bringing in this sentiment, and this sentiment says sending you lots of love, and the sentiment itself is on 3 lines, so I'm just using some washi tape to mask off the parts of the stamp so that I can stamp it and get it on 1 line. So I mask off the top line and then ink up the middle line, remove the washi tape, and stamp it down just so that I can get all of that on 1 line rather than 3. That is from the stamp set Love Bears to Stamp from the Stamps of Life, and I just make a little fishtail banner out of that. Did stamp it on some of that yellow cardstock, and then I'm going to add that there to the bottom right corner of that card layer. I am going to add some twine. I already tied it in a bow, and I'm going to add that to the left of that sentiment. Bring in a heart from the heart-shaped sprinkles, and I'm going to add that entire layer to a yellow piece of cardstock that measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. Add that to a craft A2 size card base. So I'm just going to add some hot glue to that twine and attach it there to the top of that heart. And then add a few of the hearts that are in the sprinkles just to cover up the hearts on that one postage stamp, just to add some dimension. For my next card, I have this yellow polka dot strip, which is 4 by 1 3/4. Add that to the bottom of that flower pattern paper that measures 4 by 5 1/4. I'm going to add these cookies to that polka dot strip. So a couple of them will be added flat, and then a couple of them will have some foam adhesive just to pop those up a little bit, like they're sitting on top of the other cookies. I'm also going to be bringing in the sprinkles and the sentiment sprinkled with love that was there at the top. And then I'm just going to add a little accent there to the top and bottom of that polka dot white border. This was just cut out of just some regular pattern paper. And those strips, There are two of them. They're about 4 inches. They are 4 inches wide by about an 1/8 inch tall. And then that's going to be added to a yellow card layer that's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then that will be added to a pink A2 size card base from my stash. I'm going to add some of the sprinkles there around the cookies. I think that makes for a nice little accent since I'm going to add the sprinkles with the sprinkled with love there at the top, almost like the sprinkles are falling onto the cookies. And that completes this card. So for my next card is going to be another slimline card. I have these two green layers. One is cut to 8 1/4 by 3 1/4, and another is cut to 8 3/8 by 3 3/8. So I'm taking the shorter of the two layers. The one is 8 1/4 by 3 1/4, and I'm layering on some pattern paper. This was the last full sheet of pattern paper that I had left in my 6x6 paper pad. And I decided I want to have some pattern paper on the background of this card. I initially wasn't going to do the pattern paper, but then I thought, well, let me go ahead and do it. So that's why I ended up cutting two sheets of the green, because I was going to do, I think, like a green and then a pink layer, but I chose, and I think I was going to put a yellow layer in there, but I said, no, let me just do the pattern paper. So if you didn't want to just waste a piece of solid color cardstock to layer these on, you can just take a piece of white cardstock from your stash and cut it to 8 1/4 by 3 1/4, which is what this green piece is. So I'm just layering on the entire piece of pattern paper and just trimming off the excess. If you wanted to cut it down with your paper trimmer, you can do that, but I chose just to add glue to the cardstock and then add it down and trim it to size. That line right there, I'm not worrying about it, because the amount of ephemera pieces that I'm putting on this card, it's going to cover that line up, and you can't barely see it anyway with the plaid design that's here. So I'm not worried about that in the least bit. That large pattern paper layer is going to go on that larger green layer. So that green layer is 8 3/8 by 3 3/8. So that's going to layer on so you can see some of the green peeking out around the sides. So here I'm just going to put some pieces here together how I want this to look. You can see that I have the word recipe at the bottom, and then I have that banner piece that says the perfect recipe. But I'm actually tucking the word recipe underneath the recipe card, so you can't see the word recipe on that banner. So I'm also bringing in some alphabet dies, and I die cut them in black cardstock because I wanted it to match the words the perfect on that banner, which is also die cut, or which is also colored black. And the alphabet dies that I'm using are the Punch Alphabet lowercase letters from the Stamps of Life, and I will have those linked as well down below and in my blog. So here I had positioned all of the ephemera pieces the way that I wanted them, and then I'm taking each one and being strategic about where I'm placing it and putting the glue on the back so that everything fits perfect. I wanted in the cookbooks where it says baking and all of those cookbooks that are layered, the last cookbook says sweets, and I wanted to make sure that the word sweets showed, so I made sure that the red cookbook and then the word the perfect were kind of spread out a little bit so that that word sweets showed through the middle, if that makes sense. I don't know, these little details, I'm always looking for the little details. So I put that entire layer onto a piece of yellow cardstock from my stash, which I just cut down to a slimline card size. My next card is also going to be a slimline card, but this time I'm using the triple circle drop-in. It's the slimline drop-in from the Stamps of Life. And to use this drop-in, which is the middle part there, I'm just centering it within this large rectangle slimline die. And that large rectangle is from the rounded slimline card die set from the Stamps of Life. And once I die cut that, it gives me this fun background with the holes. And that triple circle drop-in die also comes with some other layering circle dies, which I cut out of the chocolate chip pattern paper. And then I trimmed out a piece of the brown cardstock to 8.5 by 3.5 and added that to the top of a white slimline card base. It's going to fit perfectly on there. I didn't want any white showing, so that's why I cut it the same size as the slimline card base. And then I'm going to layer on the yellow piece, and that will go right there on top. And then I'm going to add those chocolate chip circles right to the center. And I'm also going to be bringing in the hugs and kisses, as well as some more chocolate pieces, the little morsels, just to add some decoration to the front. And again, this is another way to add some decoration to the front of a slimline card when you don't have pattern paper. So that's what I loved about this drop-in, is I can use the pattern paper for the circles, and then I could also bring in these morsels and add those to the top just for some added decoration. And then I'm just going to glue everything down, and once I do that, that will complete this card. And for my last card, I am also making a slimline card using the same triple circle drop-in die set from the Stamps of Life. So again, I die cut that out of some yellow cardstock, and the green layer is 8 3/8 by 3 3/8. And I took that same slimline panel die and die cut those circles so that they would be the same exact size as those circles on the panel. And I just die cut 2 of those out of the flowered paper and added those one to each side. I didn't worry about the middle because the middle will be covered up with some ephemera. I'm adding that to a pink slimline card base. That's just some pink cardstock from my stash. And then I'm adding this large "You Bake Me Happy" sentiment to the front and adding a couple hearts to each one of those circles. And I will bring in a couple of the heart-shaped sprinkles and add those to the card, as well as some of the regular sprinkles, just to add some more decoration to the front. So this was the last card that I created for my 25 cards with this collection. I still had a lot of ephemera left over, but I didn't have much more pattern paper, so I decided to stop at 25. So here are all the cards that I created with this collection. I will also have some of these in my Etsy shop. In case you're interested, you can head on over there. I will have the link to that below. Please leave me a comment below and let me know which card was your favorite. And also, please consider subscribing if you like videos like this. Go ahead and subscribe and turn on your bell notifications so that you can see more. And if you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. And remember, all of the products will be listed in the description as well as on my blog, and all of the card measurements will be listed on my blog, and a link to my blog will be down in the description box. So thank you so much everyone for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye.